welcome to FM Corner. Today, this is going to be great. With me, I have for the podcast today, Greg Christensen, who is the host of CMMS Radio. If you haven't listened to the podcast that he does, you certainly need to. I was lucky enough to be a guest on his show recently, and it was great. A lot of facility information, a lot of stuff about third-party providers, the whole ball of wax. So we're just going to ask a few questions, talk a little bit, and I think you're going to get some really good information. How's it going, Greg?
It's going good, Danny. It's really awesome to be here with you, and I appreciate that nice intro.
Absolutely. We'll kind of kick it off. Talk about CMMS Radio and what it's all about.
So CMMS Radio is about all things CMMS. CMMS is computerized maintenance management software. And what I tend to do on the podcast is some monologues, but mostly bring on guests to talk about software, but also more about the people in the process in the middle, which is the two M's. So maintenance management in and of itself is going to touch all these areas like facilities management. It could be restaurants. It could be equipment repair. It can be schools, universities, manufacturing facilities, all those types of things. We get lots of CMRPs, which are certified maintenance and reliability professionals that come on and really talk about that particular area of industry. And then I try to pull in people from other areas like restaurants or other types of facilities. And then every now and then I'll mix in something really wild that people might head scratch and say, well, why are you having that person on? And I say, well, there's something we can learn here. And I like telling stories and I like connecting with people. And like we were just saying, I love chopping it up with people that really have a story to tell and some insights. So it's about the software, but it's also really about the maintenance management, the people, the process, and the technology that kind of sits on top of that to make us all better and get a lot of cool stuff done.
Sure, and that's great. And you know, my background being restaurants and so on, and I can remember pre-CMMS days and, you know, lots of phone calls, a lot of write something down. Who am I going to call back? I got to remember to order this, and yellow sticky pads all over the place. I mean, everything you could think, and until, you know, we went to a provider, and after doing that, I walked in the morning and I turned the computer on and I went to the, you know, dispatch page or whatever. How many do I have open? How many are in trouble? How many are marked one color because they're behind? How many are over budget? And that snapshot kind of, okay, here we go. Now I know what my day is, and I just start, you know, and working through it. And there's so much dependability from facility managers, especially in the restaurant industry, because they're trying to move all their people to do communicate, talk, write through the, you know, portal, whatever it is. And so are the service companies. They're trying to do the same thing. So your communication becomes that information and cutting down on the number of phone calls or notes that get lost or whatever. It's just a whole different way to manage.
For sure. I think you mentioned something there too that really reminded me going way back, like in the 1990s when I was in building maintenance and building management at the time. And this idea behind service providers, especially with restaurants, but myriad, all kind of different facilities, right? When we're all at home doing our thing with the family, there's people out there making stuff happen that we don't even appreciate. And people have to tie that all together. I know you had to do it with, I mean, it was like 950 different locations, and these solutions can help with that. But again, it's about the people and what we're really trying to get done, how we move, the culture and all that kind of stuff. So that just reminded me of that, how we were always trying to tie that stuff together way back then. And then when systems came around, we could start leveraging that, get rid of those Post-it notes and, oh, I forgot you told me this. And it's like, man, that was important. Well, let's start documenting it. So it's good stuff.
It's a good place to follow. Kind of talk about your career a little bit. How'd you get from where you started? What'd you do to where you are now?
So I was mentioning back in the 90s, I was part of a building maintenance company, and that kind of drew on my youth when I had jobs in my teenage years might be at a certain type of manufacturing facility or processing facility, even doing janitorial. And through the 90s leading up into like 2000, 2001 and 2, one of my friends that had started that company started building a piece of technology, and it was to follow our process around day-to-day management of all these job sites. I mean, we probably had 900 employees at that time, and tying that all together with the account management, following up with the clients, working with the third-party vendors, getting all these different things done. He built this system to do that exact same thing because nothing existed to do it exactly the way we did it. Clients wanted to use it, so he called me and said, "Hey, you gotta get back over here, work with me on this new venture. We're gonna create this company and we're gonna help all these people." And that's how I got into the CMMS world. Did that for 15 straight years. We sold it. I went along for the ride, stuck with that company for a little while because you got to do some consulting and teach a bunch of people about what it is, why it is, and then that solution still exists out there. And then after that, I had a little bit of a hiatus and jumped into some other technology around project management, but that venture got put on hold. Prior to that venture getting put on hold, I started the podcast thinking, I know a bit about CMMS and maintenance management. I'm certainly not the expert, but I can pull a bunch of people in that really have these great stories around it. Maybe I'll start a podcast and just be more neutral because I don't have a product anymore, and I can talk about all the different things that I really want to talk about and how to make a difference for people. And that's how CMMS Radio was born. So that plus a little bit of consulting here and there on select projects, it kind of works for me. And I have a blast doing it. I love connecting with people. Occasionally I go to a trade conference, but that's kind of my career in a nutshell without some of the little pit stops along the way with e-commerce and all that kind of thing.
I think that's great because you and I are a contrast in this. You've been doing CMMS radio and podcasts for a really long time.
2.5 years.
I have been doing what you and I are doing, which is having someone on FM Corner do a podcast, less than a half a dozen. And the learning piece was, when Josh first asked me to do FM Corner, he's like, "You got a lot of stuff and you need to share it with people and let them learn." And I said, okay. And I started doing things and, so I would do a weekly thing and there never was a guest. I just talked for 5 or 7 minutes to give, maybe on your way home, you can listen to it and go from there and do that. And I did that for about a year and a half. And then he said, "I want you to do podcasts." I'm like, "You do podcasts?" And he said, "Yes." Well, I don't know. And he said, "Listen, you have had hundreds of these conversations with people at shows, at the bar, pick a place. It's just to talk. Let's do it." And I went, okay. And I was scared of it, because he does them every week. I don't want to do that. And then I've done, like I said, probably a half a dozen, and it's actually been easier, as long as I do it right, than the other part. But you've been doing it for a really long time. So it's kind of the new and the old, kind of together on it, because I'm still learning and still young and doing it. But at the end of the day, it's just having conversation and the opportunity for people to listen and learn.
I couldn't agree more. And I think what's really nice about the way you're describing it, as it's just a conversation, but that's actually the real stuff that people tend to want and not necessarily overproduced. Just like if you bumped into somebody at the bar, at a conference, or wherever it was. And we're also, by doing this, we're curating this conversation. It's going to kind of live out there and somebody can learn from it. I think that's one of my favorite things about it.
That's great. Talk to me about CMMS Radio speaks of many items that are important for facility managers and so on. We talked a little bit about that. From your point, why is it that important for facility managers? What's the piece they need to understand, or by listening in, here's some things that may be of interest to them that they're going to learn?
So the first thing we want to do, so in facilities management, facilities maintenance, all these things, get rid of all the buzzwords. I mean, obviously, one buzzword that's hard to get away from is the idea of digitization. We need all this data. And that's kind of true. But for me, the general viewpoint is if you've got day-to-day work orders, all kinds of work and people and things that you need to keep an eye on, keep track of, follow up on, you got clients you need to reach out to, make sure something got done to their satisfaction. You need a way to track and manage that that's better than the paper and the voicemails and the, hey, I told Joe and he told Jill and then it didn't get done. So at a very basic level, this tightens everything up and essentially creates a way for us to see, track, and manage the people, places, and things that we're dealing with on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month, and so on basis. The challenge comes in how we're building businesses, we're taking care of all these services, and now I need to stop and set up the system and start using it. And half my team, they're old school. They don't need any of that technology. Give me a wrench, give me a broom. I'm going to handle business. That's all fine and good. So you have to kind of reconcile that. But having a CMMS is going to benefit you if, one, currently you can't very quickly tell me what you have going on, what is happening, and more importantly, what is not happening. So that's question number one, is if you're dealing with any of that and it's causing any pain, you might need a CMMS. You also might not. You might be able to use Excel or something like that. Depends on company size, who you're dealing with, who you're serving. But when we turn the corner into the world of CMMS, work order management, equipment management, preventive maintenance management, those things, and the parts and the vendors that work on them and provide them and the warranties, that's when you know you need that system. The other thing I always want to caution anyone on is when you're about to endeavor on this, there's a lot of choices out there. So you got to be really careful. And the best advice I can give anyone is find something that has the specificity of what you do. For example, if we're talking about facilities managers in the restaurant space, we're really talking about restaurants, anything that's restaurant related, kitchen related. You want to potentially look for something that was born of your industry, because the advantage there tends to be that they're solving a very specific problem that you're experiencing. They're going to understand you better. They should certainly, as vendors providing this software, listen to you, understand your pain points, but look for that specificity. Because if you go, I want to search for a CMMS, you're going to find upwards of 400 companies out there because everybody works differently. So you want to tighten that up a little bit. I get asked all the time, Danny, like, what's the number one CMMS? What's the number one facilities management solution? What's the number one restaurant management solution? And I say, man or gal, that's a loaded question, because we need way more context. There's almost no such thing. It's the one that your people will use, and it's going to always boil down to the frontline workforce. Will they use that smartphone, or will they let that person that's going to input your work order and your work order completion know right away what's going on? That's what it's really going to boil down to. And I'm careful about dropping names of software, but I'm pretty sure if we weren't recording, we'd be talking about something in your industry that I'm pretty excited about. I have an episode with those stay hopping folks.
Good.
We're just not releasing it yet. So I love specificity when we talk about CMMS, and I'll throw a curveball at everybody. You're going to say, oh, Greg, that's not helpful. A lot of times, I don't care what CMMS you have, because if I get in there and assess things and make sure that the team understands why, and it makes sense to them why we're doing this, they will get on board. It just can't be hard. And it can't be something where you have your people use this system that they hadn't used before, and then they find out you're not even looking at it or using it. Those are some of the other things that I always talk about. Sorry, I spun out there.
No, you're good. No, that's great information. I think I had a buddy, and he called me a few months ago. We worked together at Ruby Tuesday, and he goes, I hate my CMMS program. I hate it. My team hates it. And he named who it was. And I went, it's a good company. I said, let me guess. I said, can you give me access to your system? And he said, yeah. And I know just enough to be dangerous. And I said, send it to me and let me play around with it. And he sent it to me, and I just went in there and started reading it and looked at it and everything. And a couple of days, I called him back and said, it doesn't work because it's not set up right. This is way too hard for your team. someone sold you more service than you ever need. At the end of the day, put the request in, put the work order acceptance, put notes in once you're there, send me a quote, tell me how much it is. I say yes or no, and then you send me a note and tell me we're done. Do you want much more than that right now? And he said, no, that's all I want. I said, that's not what you bought. You bought 15 questions to ask before you ever decide whether you're going to send a work order or not. Managers run buildings. They run restaurants, okay? If they were maintenance guys, we just have them do that, but they're not. So to ask them a whole bunch of questions to do themselves before we ever move forward, you're just making them mad. And to your point, they will quit on the system. Make it as simple as humanly possible and sell them on the simplicity of what to do. And a year from now, after everybody's got it figured out, restaurants and your vendors, then add something to it if you want to. But you can't make it hard. And that's what he was doing. How it had been set up was it was way too hard. In the company that I worked for, when we did one, we took 9 months, and then we did a test pilot for another 6 months of 50 units so we could figure it out, because I don't want it to be hard, because again, people will shut it down if it's hard. I want to make it easier.
Yeah.
I want to make it easier than looking around for a pad and then a pencil and then write something down and forget what you wrote. And I want to make it easy. And I think that's really important. And then, as you mentioned, for what facility people do, if you're on the service side and you're a vendor listening to this, you have to be on board, because your customer doesn't give you the opportunity to do work for them unless you're going to work through the system, whatever they have. And there's a bunch of them. We probably work through more than a dozen right now. So everybody that works on our dispatch team has to be fluent with a dozen different systems with different requirements. Kind of like doing warranty work. If you do warranty work for 20 companies, you got 20 different ways to do it.
Oh yeah, and that's one of the big things about how people really work. And when you look at your facilities, restaurants or otherwise, the number of vendors that you work with, and you provide this tool that's helping your organization, and it can actually make them a better vendor for you, we often very quickly forget they have a lot of other customers. So how many systems are they really dealing with? So you got to make it easier for them. And as you had mentioned, the vendor needs to also be on board with participating with the client, right? Like if I'm a service provider, and let's say back in your Ruby Tuesday days, I was only doing floor care, nothing else, but I had your entire account. And you said, well, Greg, we love having you. We want to continue to do this, but we've got this system now. We need your team to communicate with us through that. I absolutely have to find a way to make that work. And then if there's a real challenge, then I have to meet with you separately and say, how can we solve this? How can we come up with a way that everybody's winning? And that becomes a real challenge. I think there are a few systems out there, though, that have a tendency to start making it a little bit easier for the vendor, meaning the service providers at these various restaurant locations or otherwise, to participate and get involved with, a couple of little clicks. People will do that. They'll do a couple of little things, give you some quick information. But yeah, you talk about drop downs like that, and somebody who's, even a general manager of a whole region of restaurants, they're not going to do that. They're like, I'm not here to figure out if I did this and then that and then this and all this knowledge base. And all of a sudden it takes you a half hour to put in a work request for something simple. They will tune out instantly. There's way too much going on. They got a lot of other stuff to do.
Right. And they will find a workaround. And then you're in trouble because it's a workaround. You're exactly right. Tell me, and since my show is FM Corner, but tell me what a successful facility manager looks like to you.
Generally speaking, I would say a facilities manager that is successful knows a tremendous amount about their facility at any given time, including the things that are moving around and the people that are making it all happen. And one other thing that I always would throw in there, anybody in any kind of leadership role, supervisory role, you have to be doing things to make your team better. You have to be in a position to quickly help them understand why we're doing what we're doing. Sometimes they're not as plugged in as you are. So you got to have strategies for that. And I think a successful facilities manager knows a lot about their facility at any given time. They know how to leverage technology without being overbearing or being a micromanager to their team, instead empowering their team with their viewpoint and these technologies. And then on top of that, they know how to build their team in such a way that those team members can start to elevate within the organization. And maybe even, some people might not like this, maybe even roll out to a bigger role with another organization. Our job as managers of any kind is to empower, reach our goals, and make your people better. And that might mean that they grow in their career and they move on.
Sure. I think I add one thing to that. I was always taught that you teach your people to be better than you are someday. Whether you're really good or okay good, whatever you are, that you train your people that someday they will be better. If they're actually better at it than you ever were, you did the ultimate job of
absolutely
building those people up there. And I think you mentioned people. I think it was critical, especially during my career, was to know people. A little tidbit: every Ruby Tuesday basically looked the same. Might be different size, might be different whatever, but at the end of the day, they're the same. The problems in the Ruby Tuesday were pretty much the same no matter where you went. I could sit in the airport and write down 7 to 10 items that I was going to see when I went to look at restaurants that day. There were problems. I always started with tile and grout. Every restaurant. There ain't a restaurant out there that doesn't need tile and grout. I mean, it's the same kind of problems. So I already had that part. What I wanted to do was, I am coming to X location. I'm going to spend 30 to 45 minutes with a manager, general manager, director, or whoever's going to be walking along. And I'm going to ask him or her, show me, tell me. Not what did I see? What did you see? What do you need help with? And you either, okay, I got it. And then you hopefully give them the answer, what they need, or you show them why it is. Here's the reason this is happening. Do this and it will fix it. And then when I left, I would make myself a little note that I could write down that night that said, okay, I'm in Fayetteville, North Carolina, which is across the street from a Dunkin' Donuts. Okay, that's it. 2 years down the road, the manager's calling me, and Danny, I'm at Fayetteville, blah, 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 blah. And I said, the one across from the Dunkin' Donut? Oh my God. You know. I actually wrote it down and looked at it, but I knew, or you were on the left end of the mall, or you're next to that building that's painted purple, or whatever. Just so when I spoke with them, like, I know your building. I've been there 1 time or 2 times, but I've been there and I know something. And it freaked him out. Like, holy cow. He knows everything. No, I don't. I wanted something to kind of tie that back, that I knew your location. And then I think the other thing, Greg, it's really important, trust. Do what you say you're going to do. And if you don't promise it if you can't deliver it, and then try to beat what you tell them. But don't promise and then not be a person you are. You will lose people quicker than anything. You got to have trust. They got to know when they call you with a problem, you're going to do everything you possibly can in your team, and you're going to do your level best to fix it. And if you can't, you're going to communicate that back to them.
That also really reminds me of this idea that without knowing it, like we then, as if I'm part of your team, now I know I can go to you with anything because now you get an opportunity to respond. And the reason I do that is I've seen you do it with others or with me in the past, where you didn't just tear me up. You took the opportunity to understand what I was dealing with. And then that's going to increase the likelihood that I will continue to communicate. So that's another great feature of just awesome leadership, where, look, I'd rather you tell me. I don't even care if the sky's falling. Come and tell me, and I'll see if I can help you. That's good stuff.
I walked in a restaurant one time, and I saw a employee, and she was cleaning the convection oven with a water hose. Okay. And they had wondered why their controls didn't work. Well, your controls don't work because as soon as I take the panel off, it's soaked full of water. Because you were literally, this person was spraying the oven with a water hose. Called the general manager over. I said, look, you, me, the lady who's doing the cleaning, and God. That's all that knows about this. Okay. This never happens again. That hose comes out of your building tonight. And I'll figure a way to follow up. And it better not ever be in here. And you do that, and you stop this method of cleaning, and we're good. If it doesn't stop, we're going to have it's a whole different animal. Because then I owe the responsibility to let people you work for know.
Yeah.
First of all, I'm giving you a chance. You get rid of it, we're good. You don't, then it's kind of on you, and you gotta kind of do that. I mean, again, okay, somebody had the bright idea that it was good. Well, it wasn't, but they were trying to clean their oven. They just went about it the wrong way. And that's kind of how you have to look at it is, the thing, I never got upset over mistakes, but what I did kind of wonder about was if you didn't do anything. Making no decision is worse than making one that being wrong. Make a call, do something. I don't care what you do, just do something.
Yeah, it creates the opportunity to actually learn.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
The people you have on your podcast, what criteria do you use kind of to select who that's going to be?
I tend to focus in on whether I suspect and can kind of verify that they have a story that would be meaningful for maintenance management in general. And then I try to look for some specificity there with regards to maybe a specific industry, maybe a certain type of company, things like that. And it's kind of, I'm going to say this. I think everybody that's in any level or aspect of maintenance management in any industry has an important story to tell. A lot of times they don't think so. So that's probably the bigger barrier to bringing guests on, is that they feel like they don't have anything to add, they don't have anything to share, or maybe they're a little bit nervous about it. But I'm usually looking for somebody that can tell a story that has lots of different insights and things that people could utilize to either verify that they might have a problem and they should look at it in a certain way, maybe even get them thinking more critically about how they're doing something. So if it's a maintenance and reliability type expert that I have on, we're going to talk a ton about equipment, OEE, and all these different acronyms that actually have a lot of meaning. And then if it's somebody in facilities, we're going to kind of move around from a building envelope perspective. So that's really what it is. And a lot of times I get requests for people to come on, and then we'll do some little bit of discovery, talk a little bit about what they're thinking, what they want to do. And the one thing I won't do most of the time is I don't want to do much in the way of product pitching, although we need to sometimes showcase what somebody does. Mm-hmm. I really want to have organic conversations that are a little bit less structured, but that's really how it happens. And I get guests that want to come on and it doesn't make sense. And I tell them, I got to think about that one, see how we're going to make that meaningful for people.
Sure. Oh, that's correct. We're about out of time, but I got one more, please. Give me one success thing, something you're really proud of, and give me your biggest regret during your career. We got about.
Oh, all right. So I will say that I told the little story about how I was part of a CMMS build out and that we had an exit, and that I feel like it was a successful exit. And I think that was a pretty special moment because a lot of people don't get to that moment. So that was very special for me because of what we had done, the team we had assembled, what we did with so few people that usually doesn't happen that way. So that was really great. As far as regret goes, maybe about that in particular, I think I should have approached it a little bit differently for myself in having a better strategy post exit. But mixed into that whole thing, when we talk about regret, which I don't regret it anymore, but I wish I would have started doing this a hell of a lot sooner in my life, in my career, because I'm just telling everybody, if you got something you want to do and you think you got something to say, get out there and say it. Ain't nothing bad going to happen.
Sure. Absolutely. Well, that's about all of our time today. I want to tell, if you're a facility guy or lady and you're out there or in any type of industry and so on, you want to listen to anything related to CMMS, but listen to Greg's podcast, CMMS Radio. It's outstanding. Please, you want to go listen to the one that he and I did, please do. But it's great. And Greg, I certainly appreciate it. I think people can listen in, they can learn a ton, and certainly wanted to say thank you for taking the time to be on FM Corner today.
Oh, it's an honor to be here. Thank you, Danny. I really had a lot of fun.
Good. Great. And folks, please listen in. We will get it posted quickly, and then you can listen in and then start listening every week when Greg does podcasts. A lot of good information out there, and it will helpful. It was good for me, and I think it will be very helpful for you. So thank you, sir, and I appreciate it. We'll get it up as quick as we can, and thanks again.